Welcome, everybody, to an all-new episode of Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. Thank you so much for joining me as I take my weekly look at everything going on in the world of combat sports. We got a packed show coming at you today. We got a fight card from the UFC to recap from last week, UFC 324 out there in Vegas, first one of the Paramount Plus era. We will also preview this week's card today over in Australia, UFC 325, title on the line in that one. We'll also preview coming up later on today the Ring 6 card on DAZN in boxing, where you have Teofimo Lopez versus Shakur Stevenson. That is going to be an awesome fight. And we'll hit on a couple news and notes around combat sports as we wrap up the show later on. But make sure you follow us on all social medias on X. We are at Fighting Lines on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. It is at Fighting Lines Pod. You can follow me at On Air Mafia on all those socials as well. And then wherever you're taking part in the show, whether you are listening or watching on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, comment on it, share it with friends, share it with enemies. Just get it out there as much as you can to get more people involved with Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. We always love everyone getting involved here with the show. But let's get right into the show and start talking about what we saw last weekend for the first card of the UFC this year of 2026 with UFC 324. All right, well, last week, the UFC kicked off their 2026 schedule with their first card, the first number card, UFC 324, skipping over the fight nights and the teasers and the lower cards as they get ready to start things off with Paramount Plus. Went right into one of the numbered cards. No more pay-per-views. If you got the subscription, you got it. It was awesome to watch, awesome to see. Finally, not to shove almost $100 a fight card just to get some great fights. And there was some good action up and down that card out there at the T-Mobile in Las Vegas. And it was headlined by the interim lightweight title fight between Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett for that belt. Of course, Topuria, the champion in that division, taking some time off dealing with family things, with custody battles. So these guys stepped up and fought for an interim title as we wait for the champion to return. Gaethje, 37-year-old out there in Denver, the highlight, big-time, long-time UFC fighter. 14 fights for the UFC before this, 14 bonuses. And that streak continues. He gets another bonus with this one in this 15th fight. We'll talk about the result in just a second, but he was a former interim lightweight champion, former BMF champion, trying to get that interim lightweight title for the second time in his career, going against Paddy Pimblett, the 31-year-old from Liverpool, coming in there, the baddie from over there in the UK, the hope of England, trying to get that title there. 23-3 in his MMA career, 7-0 in the UFC before this fight, coming off the biggest win of his career, that Michael Chandler third-round TKO. A lot of hype behind him. And the way they were pumping him up, the way they were setting things up, where they were skipping over Sarukian, I thought that they were setting this up for Pimblett to win this fight. And you know what? They very well might have. But he didn't follow through, because even though I picked him minus 230 on the money line, I thought this was going deep. We had the over 2.5 rounds, minus 116. That hits. And the title ends up in the hands of Justin Gaethje for the second time. He is the interim lightweight champion of the UFC. Wins by unanimous decision over Paddy Pimblett, 48-47 on one card, 49-46 on two judges' scorecards. Now, this was a tough fight throughout, but obviously, as you see with the scoring, Gaethje just doing his thing for 4 out of 5 rounds, according to two judges. One of them had 3-2. Some people had some controversy. Let's break it down right now. In round one, Gaethje started right away coming at Pimblett, putting him on his back heel, coming forward, trying to strike at him, while Pimblett tries to back up and throw all different kinds of things to keep Gaethje away, but it just wasn't doing enough. He kept coming forward. Gaethje even got him against the cage 90 seconds in, drops him, lands some more shots before Pimblett gets back up. 30 seconds later, Gaethje just lets him off the mat. Then the uppercut started landing for Pimblett later in the round, but it was just more of Gaethje coming after him, coming forward. Actually got him with an eye poke at one point in that round after getting warned pretty early in the fight. The ref told him early in that first round, watch those eyes, watch those fingers, don't poke the eyes. Gets him in that first round. Fight takes a little bit of time, not too much, gets right back into the fight though. Later in the round, Gaethje has him against the cage again. Big throwing, big shots, trying to beat him up there, and he does. I think he takes that round 10-9 in my book. Round two, this was a big one for Gaethje. Right away, stalking Pimblett once again, pushed him back against the cage. Pimblett trying to throw from outside, but Gaethje drags him to the mat with a headlock for the second time with less than 2 minutes left in the round, and just starts landing some good shots on him for about 45 seconds. Pimblett gets back up. Later on, Gaethje lands another big shot that drops him and just puts some big, painful punches on him. Now we see after the round, as we're seeing replays, which are legal in Vegas too for the refs to use, that kind of caught him with a thumb to the eye on one of those shots before he dropped him. So that led to a lot of damage. I'm sure that, discombobulated him, shook him up, and then Gaethje jumps on him and gets another 10-9 round. Now, a lot of people complaining about that. A lot of people were upset about it, that they didn't take a point. And you know what they should have? They're right. Because he won him in the first, then he eye poked in the first, and he said after that eye poke, the referee told Gaethje, you do it again, it's an automatic point. He did it again. They didn't catch it right away, but you can use, as we found out last year with the D'Elia versus Waldo Cortes Acosta fight, you can use replay in Vegas. And they didn't use it for this one. I mean, they looked at it, but they didn't take a point away. So now Gaethje up 2-0 going into round 3. Again, both guys are trading in the middle of the cage now this time. Pimblett's not backing down. His corner was in his ear. After that second round, they're telling him, I want some takedowns. Well, he didn't do that, but he was backing up. His eye was still bleeding, but he starts picking apart Gaethje a little bit more from the outside. Starts getting some more strikes in there. I thought it was his best round of the fight. I gave that 10-9 to him, so now Gaethje's up 1 round. 4-5. Gaethje back to doing his thing, back to coming forward, putting the pressure on Pimblett, landing some big shots on Pimblett, especially in that 4th round. He's landing those looping rights. He gets the 10-9 there with another good round. 5th round, Pimblett rocks Gaethje early, but Gaethje answers right away, comes back at him. Pimblett goes for the takedown finally in the 5th round with 3.5 minutes left in the fight, but he can't keep Gaethje down. Gaethje continues to land some shots at him throughout the round. He wins the fight. I thought so. I thought it was 49-46. I thought he won 4 rounds to 1. That 3rd round for Pimblett, otherwise 1-2, 4-5, all go for the new interim lightweight champion in Justin Gaethje. Now, a lot of people were upset, as I said, about that second round eye poke. They thought that he should have lost a point. They thought, with all the things that we've had going on with eye pokes, maybe something like a DQ, or they should have stopped the fight. And I get that. As I said, that was a legit eye poke. And you can use replay in Las Vegas to find those kind of things out. So even though they miss it in the moment, he told him in the first round, you poke him again, you're losing a point. He does poke him. They go to the replay, still don't take a point away. But even if they did, for all the people that were complaining about it, all the people acting like that changed the fight, you still had 3 rounds after that. And if you do take the point away like they should have, guess what? He still wins 48-47 on 2 cards and a draw on 1 card. So either way, he walks out with that belt if they do the right thing there. So it wouldn't have changed the scoring. It wouldn't have changed the fight. It stinks that it happened. It stinks that we keep having this happen, and there really isn't any rectifying of it by the judges, by the referees, by the UFC, by these organizations at large. But that's part of the game, unfortunately, right now. And I don't think it really changed the fight either way for either fighter. The real reason he lost the fight is simple. He didn't fight his style. He fought the way Gaethje wanted to fight. That's why Pimblett does not have this belt. That's a big reason. I'm not going to say that's the only reason because, of course, the highlight is a badass. This guy is in there and doing damage every time he fights. He has 15 straight fights of fight bonuses, performance bonuses. He got fight of the night for this one with Pimblett. But Pimblett didn't try to take him down enough. When you have a guy that's a great striker like Gaethje, you try to negate that. You try to get him on his back. You don't let him keep coming forward and plugging you with those overhand rights. Even if it was sloppy striking, you take him down and you get it out of the way and you dominate him there. You score some points. You land some elbows from top. You hold him down and tire him out. So by the 4th and 5th round, he's gassed. If you really want to go for the stand-up fight, gas him out in the first 3 rounds, fighting you off on the ground so that 4 or 5, he can barely keep his arms up and you can throw some big shots on him. That's not what Pimblett did. His corner even asked for that after round 2. After the first 2 rounds of Gaethje tagging him, they said, get some takedowns. He didn't do it till the 5th. So the problem wasn't the eye poke. It was that Pimblett didn't fight the smart fight. Maybe if he does, maybe he wins that fight, but that's something he's going to have to learn now after coming off this loss. This is something where you really got to go back, study tape, and realize that you didn't fight to your strengths. You fought to his. You did exactly what he wanted, and that's why he is now the interim lightweight champion. I mean, if you look at the numbers, they showed them towards the end of the fight. Pimblett had the most significant strikes he's ever landed in a fight. The problem was so did Gaethje. If you're going to stand and trade with the guy, you better be sure you're going to avoid his strikes. He didn't. So you can't let that guy keep coming at you, keep walking you down, and keep tagging you. You got to get him in a clinch, get him against the cage, get him on his back, take away his ability to land while you get your strikes in. And Paddy Pimblett just didn't do that in that fight. So now credit to Justin Gaethje. He is the champion of this division as far as the interim champion right now. I mean, he should be fighting Ilia Topuria next. We'll see if that's what happens, because if you're going to set up an interim belt, whoever has that belt has to go unify it with the champ. But does that change? Because we've seen the UFC not necessarily do what makes sense. What would have made sense was Arman Tsarukyan being in this fight against somebody where he probably would have dominated them and been the interim champion and then fought Topuria when he came back. Now he's not. Now a guy who's ranked higher than either of these guys who fought is sitting there waiting for the champion or waiting for the winner of this fight or just waiting for something, waiting to find out what's next. So as the interim champion, Gaethje probably should get the next shot at Topuria, but do you put that on the White House card where you have a chance of an American losing in front of the White House? Probably not the best of ideas. So do you avoid that and put Topuria against Tsarukyan? Put that on that kind of card or something else like that? Maybe you could do that and then, have a different situation. Or maybe you just keep Gaethje on the shelf and don't go for that card, but go for a different card. Put him against Topuria because that obviously makes the most sense. Interim champion, mesh them together. So then what do you do with Tsarukyan after that? If you're not going to put him against either the interim champ or the champ, you put him against Pimblett. There, he got some bad blood there. And see if Pimblett can bounce back, although that would probably knock him further down the ladder because Tsarukyan would probably dominate him. Or you hold off Tsarukyan for a little bit. Put him against the winner of Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira, that BMF title that we're going to be seeing coming up in a couple months. Maybe you hold him off and put him against the winner of that as you wait for Gaethje and Topuria to fight, and then the winners of those two fights end up fighting. That's probably what I think is the smartest play. Since you made this interim belt, you put him against a champ and then have Tsarukyan fight one of those guys, and then you have a new top challenger, and you can't really go wrong with the Tsarukyan, Holloway, Oliveira, next guy up situation. So I think that's the smartest play, but we'll see what they do after this fight now that you have Justin Gaethje as the interim champion in this division. Credit to both these guys in the post-fight because they're both very gracious in the cage in their interviews. Especially for Patty, you're sitting there, you're pretty down that you lost this fight and you hang around, wait for an interview after Gaethje had his time. He was very gracious. He talked about how tough Patty was. And then Patty, when he got his turn on the mic, he didn't complain. He didn't blame the eye poke. He didn't blame other things. He was very gracious, talked about how great Justin is, and then used some of his time for an even bigger cause. He was out there talking about how there are a bunch of people that he knows who have, taken their lives recently, and talked about the importance of mental health for men, to not bottle it up, to take care of yourself, to, go talk to somebody. So he was not just licking his wounds and acting like he was cheated. He was gracious in defeat and then used his time for a higher calling, for, getting important information out there because too many people don't deal with that. And when you see guys like this that can be open about their feelings, that can talk about that kind of stuff and encourage others to do so, I think that releases the stigma a lot. I've talked about that on many of my shows that, whether it's BKFC, UFC, PFL, some of these fighters that we have seen be very open about that, I think is important to get a lot of other men to do the same thing and a lot of other people and fight fans in general. So good on Patty for not only being gracious in defeat, not only being very humble, but using his time to speak to shine a light on something much more important than that fight and anything that he was going through in that time. Now, the co-main event on that card, of course, ended up being a bantamweight battle between number 3 Sean O'Malley and number 5 Song Yadong because of us losing the Harrison versus Nunez battle for the women's title. And hopefully that is a quick recovery for Kayla Harrison. We saw pictures of her being back at the gym this week, without the neck brace, showing the big scar like right in her throat area. I mean, that's a scary thing to have them opening up your neck, open up your throat, really to go in there and fix things that could have paralyzed you. So hopefully she does things the right way and still has a quick recovery, but does it the right way, make sure she is fully back. And we look forward to that fight. But we still got a great fight as a co-main event anyway between two bantamweights in O'Malley and Yadong, two guys fighting kind of a part of mini tournament on this card to see who can get into that bantamweight title mix. Of course, now Petr Yan is a champion after beating the Machine Dvalishvili at the end of last year. But does Dvalishvili get the rematch right away? Does he take some time off after fighting 4 title fights last year and have somebody else fight in Yan's first title defense? We'll see. But some of the guys that were up for that included these two. Yadong, of course, a 20-year-old from China, training out of Team Alpha Male, 22-8-1 his MMA career, 10-3 in the UFC before this fight. O'Malley, 31-year-old from Montana. Sugar Sean was coming off back-to-back losses to Dvalishvili, trying to get back in that title mix. We thought O'Malley was going to win this fight. Again, the way the UFC was trying to set this up, I thought Yadong was dangerous, but O'Malley was going to have some length and height on him. I thought he would use that effectively, and he did. He wins minus 215 on the money line. The book was leaning heavily for it to go over, so we were playing O'Malley by points at plus 115. You get the better odds there. That one hit as well as he beat Song Yadong by unanimous decision, 29-28 on all three judges' scorecards. Now, this fight was close. Honestly, it goes to O'Malley. I thought it could have went the other way. There's a chance. I'm not saying that they got it wrong, but round one was really tight. And that would have been a big decider when you get to the scorecards because there was a lot of feeling out from both guys early on. O'Malley was touching a little bit from the outside on Song, who was coming forward. He was being the aggressor. Not a ton was thrown. But Song got a late takedown in that first round on O'Malley. O'Malley tried to throw in the guillotine attempt to hold him off a little bit, kept him in guard. So depends how the judges see it. Do they give the points to O'Malley because he got some decent strikes from the outside and then had a submission attempt? Or does the aggression, the forward motion of Song and his takedown matter more? Well, it looked like the judges gave it to O'Malley, and that's the way he did it. 10-9, all three judges' scorecards, slightly more on the strikes. I thought he edged him out slightly as well because he threw more, but you really couldn't fault or shame a judge if they saw it differently. And if they did, that would have changed the entire fight because round two went to Song Yadong, clearly. He was letting some decent counter shots to start the round. Then he got a takedown halfway through the round, had O'Malley's back while they were standing when he got back up to the feet, just hammering that right leg over and over with his knees, trying to soften him up. Now, Song was bleeding from the mouth a little bit, but after a couple more shots here and there, gets another takedown with 100 seconds left in the fight, just over a minute and a half left. He gets another takedown, lands some good shots on the break when they get back to the feet. So I thought that was clearly his best round. I thought he takes that round, and we were all even going into the final round. And that's where O'Malley does his thing. That's where he looks best, was this final round, and that really set him apart and gets him the win because even though Song was coming forward, O'Malley was landing some good punches early on. He started to take down just about halfway into the round. He was picking him apart a little bit later in the round with those shots from the outside on the feet, escaping more takedown attempts. Strong finish by him. That seals the fight for him. He gets the win, 10-9 for O'Malley. And honestly, if we went a couple more rounds, if this was a 5-round fight, O'Malley might have a chance of finishing him. But he didn't. It's a 3 rounds. Go to the judges' scorecards. He gets 29-28 decision. And his post-fight, he called out Petr Yan. He said he wants a rematch. Now, he has a win over Yan, but he says that would make it an even better fight, that he has beaten him. He has beaten the champ. So now, can he get his revenge as he defends his title? He thinks he deserves that shot. He says, of course, if Merab wants to fight right away, then he gets that shot first. So good on him having that humility, knowing that the machine obviously is the most deserving of anybody in that division and willing to step aside and wait for him to get his shot first. But if the machine wants to fight for that title, he wants to wait for the winner of that and get his title shot. I don't know if he necessarily gets that. I mean, he was lower in these rankings. As we said, he was number 3 before he got into this fight. He doesn't move because of a fight earlier on the card. We'll talk about that a little later with a familiar name who is ahead of him in those rankings and probably the most deserving by record, by what he has done, maybe not stylistically, maybe not flashiest, but by what he has done, he is the most deserving after the machine. But we'll see what the UFC does because sometimes they favor the flash. Sometimes they favor the big mouth, the guy who can talk, who can hype up a fight. And O'Malley can do that. And he has some good performances, but I'm not saying this was his best one. I'm not saying this is a title chance clincher by any means. It was a good fight, especially at the end, but he could have lost it. One more 2 punches. Maybe if Song holds that takedown a little earlier in that first round, that would change the fight, and he would have been the loser once again. So good performance by him, good win. Not necessarily gifted him a title shot off that one, though. Before little guys matched up, we had some big boys getting into that cage. Heavyweight battle between number 5, Waldo Cortes Acosta, and number 8, Derek Lewis. Cortes Acosta, the salsa boy, was coming in here on a nice hot streak last year. He had back-to-back wins over Ante Dalia and Shamil Gaziev. Now, he won in 4 of his 5 fights last year. That's right. He fought 5 times last year and then was on a January card. And he wanted to be on the December card last year. He wanted to fight 6 times, but he gets on this January card going against the Black Beast, Derek Lewis from Houston, the 40-year-old. One of the most prolific knockout artists in the heavyweight division for the UFC in its history. Always exciting. He'd won his last 2 fights and 3 of his last 4 after a little bit of a tough run there at heavyweight. So would the guy on the hype train come in there and keep on rolling, or would the Black Beast knock him off the tracks and get himself back into the title picture? As far as the betting went, I took a chance on Lewis because he was a big underdog. I know Cortes Acosta was coming in strong, and Lewis had kind of been a little bit long in the tooth here, a little bit struggles over the last couple of years, but the one punch power that the Black Beast has, give me plus 245, or, I think it was even plus 285 by the time you got to the fight. I was going to take my chance there. That didn't go so well. We knew it was going to knock it a distance with these guys because that's the way the books were shading it heavy. We took under 1.5 on the total rounds at plus 106 because there's some big knockouts, some quick knockouts. It goes just over that. We missed that one as well. So missed both those on this one that we took a chance on. One to play the over, one to go contrarian, but these guys were just packing too heavy of hands. Cortes Acosta wins by second round TKO, but 3 minutes and 14 seconds into the round. So about 45 seconds too late for us, unfortunately. It's a very slow start. Guys feeling each other out in the first round, a lot of mutual respect for the power each other had. Waldo was stalking. Lewis was moving a little bit, trying to close the distance, but he never really could. Cortes Acosta lands some jabs, nothing really huge. Lewis never really got his hands on him. 10-9 Cortes Acosta. Go to the second round. Again, Lewis is trying to get in there, tries a flying kick, but can't really land it clean. You get a good counter right by Cortes Acosta, 45 seconds in there. A few counters, a few jabs. 2 minutes in, he's landing a little bit more. Nothing huge, nothing crazy. But then 3 minutes into that round, Cortes Acosta lands a nice straight right that shakes Derek Lewis, puts him in the butt. I think he was more off balance than a big shot. It wasn't a huge punch. It was kind of just a straight right. But Derek Lewis went to the mat and seemed to give up there. He was frustrated not being able to get his hands on his opponent. And once his butt hit that mat, he said, you know what? I'm just going to stay here. Why am I going to get back up? So Cortes Acosta jumped on him, landed some big shots. Ref eventually jumps in, and not too long later, the fight is over. It was very weird. And a lot of people are calling it out. I mean, what is going on with the Black Beast? That he takes that shot and then he just kind of gives up. But, we've seen other fights where he just didn't really seem into it. So now Cortes Acosta gets another win, his third in a row. Probably not climbing up in the rankings just yet because he was already sitting there pretty elevated at number 5, but calling out some of the guys in front of him. He's took a shot at Curtis Blades, so let's go. He wants to fight him. That would be an interesting matchup because what style holds that fight? Curtis Blades loves to take guys down, throw them to the mat. Is Cortes Acosta able to hold it to the mat or knock out Curtis Blades before he gets his hands on him and throws him down? We'll see if that ends up coming to fruition. That would be an interesting fight, but a smart one for him to call out because got to work that way up and just look at who's in front of him, taking some shots. Next one up for him, he thinks, is Curtis Blades. We'll see if the UFC obliges him. But what's next for the Black Beast now? He's 40 years old, kind of been up and down the last couple of years in the heavyweight division. Does he have it in him to keep taking these shots? Does he really want to get back in there and, slugfest with some of these guys? I don't know. We'll have to see what is next for the Black Beast. I hope he's not done because he's one of the most exciting fighters we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years. But if he's going to give us what we just saw there in this last fight, probably better for him to just pack it up and figure out the next chapter of his life. Then at women's flyweight, you had a battle of contenders here between number 2, Natalia Silva versus number 6, Rose Namajunas. Namajunas, of course, the former champion at strawweight. Thug Rose, a 33-year-old fighting out of Denver, Colorado. Hadn't had a great record since coming into flyweight. She was 3-2 coming into this fight, coming off a decision win over Miranda Maverick last June. Natalia Silva, the 20-year-old from Brazil, unbeaten in the UFC, 7-0 before this fight. She should have been in line for a title shot already against Shevchenko, but instead of sitting back and waiting, decided to put that on the line, jump in short notice against a former champion in Thug Rose, and she does exactly what she should have. She was a minus 420 favorite on the money line. We liked her there. We thought this was going to go the distance. The book was shading it that way. Both these fighters have gone deep into fights. So we had Silva by points at minus 180, and that is what she does. She beats Rose Namajunas by unanimous decision, 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Now, this was interesting because I thought that was clearly the right score when I watched this fight, although it seemed from the broadcast that DC and Rogan had different thoughts. They thought Rose Namajunas won that first round. I thought clearly Silva won that round because even though Namajunas was coming forward, even though she had some moments for some good strikes, there was a lot of feeling out. And when they did engage, I thought Silva was landing 2 to 3 shots for every one that Namajunas was throwing. Now, the numbers bared out a little closer, but I thought that she was more aggressive, more trying to get some short combos as opposed to just one shot in the feeling out. So even though not a ton was landed, I had Silva up after that first round, 10-9. Round 2, Namajunas' best round here. She gets it to the mat. She makes the most of it, gets some good strikes on top. She takes that round 10-9 with some good ground control throughout the second half of that round. So we're all even going into that final round, and that's when Silva really opened things up. She got a lot more aggressive, was throwing with a lot more power, a lot more bad intent. And I thought she did a good job in that last round to really put it on the judges to say, I'm the one that should win this fight, to make a statement that she was the better fighter in this fight. And she gets that. 10-9 for the third round for Silva, 29-28 on my card. That's how the judges see it as well. And now she improves to 8-0, still unbeaten in the UFC. Now, I think Silva is clearly the number one contender for Shevchenko's next title shot. They seem to be a little bit different with that on the broadcast. DC and Rogan were talking about how you cannot discount Manon Fiorot, and she is a great fighter, but she had that first round finish right after she just got a unanimous decision loss to Shevchenko in a title shot. So she's recently been in there. You need some new blood. Silva, unbeaten, 8-0, ranked above her. You got to give her that next shot. I think, of course, Blanchfield and the good wins that she's had lately are in that mix as well. But still, unbeaten Natalia Silva, I think, needs to be the next challenger for Valentina Shevchenko, the next one to see if she can do anything against the champ, because not many people have. The Bullet has been one of the most dominant champions in women's MMA in the UFC history. We'll see if Silva can be the one to get the chance to upset her next. Then at featherweight, good battle between Arnold Allen and Jean Silva, number 6, number 10 in that division. Allen, the 32-year-old from England, Silva, the 29-year-old from Brazil. We thought Silva was going to win this fight. I had him at minus 290. He gets the win. I thought the fight would go the distance at minus 118 for yes. It does. Both those hit as Silva gets the win over Allen by unanimous decision, 30-27 on one card, 29-28 on two cards. So he gets it on all three judges' scorecards, even if they saw it slightly different. From the get-go, I thought Silva was coming forward throughout most of this fight. Round one, Allen was trying to pick him apart from the outside. I thought Silva was landing the big shots. He had some decent shots throughout, and then just before the end of the round, has a nice combo that shakes down, puts some big punches on him. I thought that clearly got him the round 10-9, with him being the aggressor coming forward and doing the most damage with his punches. DC and Rogan might have been a little disagreement there as far as with me. Now round two, Allen starts to come forward more. He tries to change things up. Instead of being on the back foot, he tries to be the aggressor, but that just makes it easier for Silva to land on him. I thought he put some big shots on him in that round to, again, win it 10-9 and be up 2-0. And then round three, Silva was looking great throughout that round. He was landing in control with the big shots. Even in the last minute, pulled a Max Holloway with 40 seconds left, points to the center of the mat, telling Allen, let's go. Just stand here and trade. Now, they didn't exactly do that. They're still moving. They're still throwing some good shots. Allen had a couple good shots, but Silva started landing big on him, even to the point of late in that round. He kind of throws him to the mat, pushes him down, and as Allen's on all fours there, trying to turtle up a little bit and cover up and survive to the end, jumps on his back with 2 feet and jumps off like he's doing some MMA parkour. But clearly won the round, won the fight. I had it for Silva throughout that one. I thought he did a great job. Of course, two judges gave the first round to Allen, so that's where we get the slight difference of opinion there. But I thought Silva did great throughout that fight, coming forward, being aggressive, landing the more powerful shots, the more decisive shots. I thought he clearly won that fight. Judges give it to him as well, and now he gets back in the win column. Another one up there for the Fighting Nerds team that he is part of. Great battle by him. One fight we want to touch on the prelims because it has importance. I was surprised this was on the prelims because, as I mentioned, with that O'Malley Adong fight, you had another bantamweight fight, number 2, Umar Nurmagomedov versus number 7, Davison Figueiredo. I don't know why this is buried on the prelims. You're not trying to entice people to go buy the pay-per-view anymore with the big fight at the end. But you have a top-ranked fighter here in Nurmagomedov, the 30-year-old from Dagestan. Only career loss was to Merab Dvalishvili for that title. So he's trying to get right back in there and get another title shot, whether it's against Jan, if Merab needs some time off, or, maybe getting back in there once those two rematch between Dvalishvili and Jan and fighting the winner of that one. But Figueiredo, the 38-year-old from Brazil, the former flyweight champion, hasn't had a great run here moving up in bantamweight. We'll see if his career is coming to a close here. But Nurmagomedov was a huge favorite, the biggest one on this card, minus 1,500. He clearly was meant to win this fight, and he does. We went with the much safer, much better odds of Nurmagomedov by points at minus 115 because so many of his fights go to decision. And Figueiredo was a tough guy, was a former champion, didn't expect him to get finished. So we get much better odds at minus 115 by Nurmagomedov by points, and that hits. He beats him by unanimous decision, 30-27 on all three judges' scorecards. Relatively boring fight, honestly. Figueiredo seemed more intent on not getting taken down and not losing than actually fighting with any intent of winning. Mostly on the back foot throughout that fight. He had some moments here and there, landed some good counters at times. Even had Nurmagomedov on the mat with him in control at one point, but For the most part, it was Nurmagomedov coming forward, Nurmagomedov picking him apart. He had a couple of takedowns where he had some good mat control, but he dominates this fight. In my opinion, he becomes first up if Merab Dvalishvili does not get an immediate rematch. If Petr Yan defends that belt against anyone that is not the machine, then it should be against Nurmagomedov. This guy is almost unbeatable to everybody. The only one he's lost to is Dvalishvili. If Dvalishvili wants to fight for that title and they give him that rematch right away, and then Nurmagomedov fights the winner of that, that makes sense. But jumping O'Malley over him with a okay performance against Song Yadong does not make sense to me. He is the top-ranked guy in this division outside of the champion and the former champion, and I think he needs to hold that spot as the next contender, depending on what shakes out between them two. If they rematch, then he waits. If they don't, and Merab needs time off, then Nurmagomedov should be in there against Petr Yan fighting for that title, while O'Malley either sits on the sideline for a while or fights somebody else to stay fresh and stay ready. Now, this was the first broadcast on Paramount Plus for the UFC. So I want to give some thoughts on that because obviously there are going to be some differences, going to be some new things. Some things they kept the same. Obviously, the broadcast team was the same. A lot of, things, the way they did them were almost exactly as they were before, as they have throughout different other TV deals. It's going to be some new things, but for the most part, it just chugs along the same product. But I love the opening they had with Travis Barker, where they had him in the octagon there with the drum kit, talking through the different styles of these fighters, making up different beats to match the way that they fight. I thought that was awesome. That was really cool. Getting him involved and having him put his musical mind to the way that these fighters fight and the way that they, stylistically would be music-wise. That was really cool. And then they continued with the Blink 182, which was a little weird because first they have Ron Perlman doing voiceover. And it was great voiceover. No qualms about that. But you have him very deep, very serious, very slow and deliberate. And then all of a sudden you go to Blink 182's The Rock Show. It just was weird dichotomy, having him talk over that, having him mix with that. If you're going to have Perlman do the voiceover, you got to have some like hard, slow, or dun, 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 dun kind of music, something to really back that up, some epic kind of orchestral or something like that, not quick punk music. That just didn't fit to me. I don't mind them having Blink 182 like that, using that song, using something like that, but I think you got to change up either how you're doing the oration or change up the music because those two didn't jive perfectly to me. As far as Paramount Plus, I thought one thing they need to work on seriously is the on-demand experience. Because I watched some of the fights live, but I got two young kids. I'm not going to be able to stay up all night, and I'm not going to be able to sit there for 6 hours and have everyone leave me alone to watch fights. So I watch what I can. Sometimes it's on the second TV or another device where the volume's not up there or not loud and not being part of everything. A lot of what I get is getting to go back and watch the fights later. So you got to fix that on-demand experience because I could find the whole 3 hours of the weigh-in show. I can find 3 hours of the post-fight press conference all put together. I cannot find the card for UFC 324 just all in one package by itself, broadcast taped, put right back out there for your view. And I want to hear how it sounded. I want to see the walkouts. I want to do all these things. And they have the fights cut up, but it's very weird. Later in the week came out kind of with going into 325. Then you can go to different tabs and find fights and watch them that way. But it wasn't a fluid experience. It wasn't easy to find the fights. It wasn't easy to move between them if you're on a smartphone or other devices. So broadcast was great. It looked great. It sounded great. The cameras were better. You could see that the quality was better. But they need to fix the on-demand, go back, watch it afterwards experience. And as far as the live experience, a lot of people were complaining about that too because there were a lot of commercials. When guys were walking out, they're throwing out commercials, picture-in-picture style. When they're going to the corner in between rounds, they were doing that. Maybe they could rework that where you get a little bit of, a couple minutes in between fights to do that. The broadcast was a little bit more clunky because they lost a couple fights. So there was a lot of vamping and stalling and not getting right to them. That thing's going to work itself out. But as far as the commercials go, it stunk that there were a lot of them. But I agree with Dana White, which is something I don't say often. What do you want? They're not charging you out the nose for it, so they got to make their money somehow. They're paying $1 billion to air this a year. They have to make money, and they're not making it off your subscription for $9 or $14 a month. That's not anywhere near what you would have been paying before. With ESPN Plus, you had to buy the subscription for that, and then you had to pay $80 per pay-per-view. So you would have been paying, what, $175 just for the month of January to watch these two cards? Instead, you're paying $9 or $14. I mean, come on, you can't have it both ways. It stunk. There's a lot of commercials, but not the end of the world for the price you're paying. I'm okay with it. And my bigger concern is if people bitch enough about the commercials that they start taking some of those away, what they're going to do to make up for it is raise the subscription costs. Instead of you being able to pay $9 or $14, maybe now you pay $20 for a special UFC package. Or maybe it goes to 25 or was it 45 like DAZN does with their pay-per-views now with this new high tier that they have. So was it exactly fluid? No. There was some choppiness to it because of all the commercials. It wasn't the greatest experience. They're going to work that out, but chill out on the complaining because I don't want to take more money out of my pocket to be able to watch these fights. It's ridiculous. It's a mortgage payment before we got to the Paramount Plus. Take it with what it is and stop complaining. Enjoy it. It also was cool to see that we found out at the end of the week that the bonuses would be changed for the fighters and increased. Because earlier in the week when Dana was talking about it, he still did not know what those numbers were going to be. But we found out right before the fights that they're now going to be $100,000 bonuses for fight of the night and performance of the night, and $25,000 bonus for anybody who gets a finish. So they're enticing you to get the finish, to get the big knockout, or to get the submission, and you get one of those other bonuses, you're now getting 6 figures. So that's good for the fighters. It's trickling down a little bit too, because while we had Justin Gaethje talk about how he wasn't making $1 more for this fight, and then Dana White came out and said, well, we called his manager, but they didn't answer the phone. We're going to offer him a deal. The manager did confirm that there were calls and that they didn't really respond to them. So we'll see what happens next. Now he is interim champ. If that gets him a new deal with a bigger payday. And Dan Hooker came out in interviews and said, hey, listen, my manager answered the call. I'm getting paid better. So we still don't know the numbers exactly. We don't know if it's really enough to add up to them getting a bigger share of the pie than they were before, getting closer to what other major sports get, where they're getting 50% of the revenue, or where, boxers getting 10 to 15 to 30 million to a fight. They're not getting that, but they're getting better. And we'll see if it can continue to get better for them. Hopefully it does, because these guys put their bodies on the line a lot more than a lot of other athletes. Not that those don't take a toll on you, not that those aren't incredible feats of strength and athleticism and everything that they do, but these guys are getting in there and fighting. So they deserve to get paid better. And hopefully it continues to go up for them and they continue to get taken care of better with these new deals that the UFC has gotten through Paramount Plus. Speaking of things that need to be better, the fans in Vegas for that card last week, seriously, be better, because they weren't always the most exciting fights. A bunch of them went to decision. And of course, we want to see finishes. We want to see stoppages. We want to see fighters putting on their best performance. And not every one of them was that. There was a lot of feeling out in a bunch of different fights. But you were getting into situations where you're halfway through the first round and the fans at the T-Mobile are booing. Really? You act like it's so easy. You act like they can just go in there, head down, swinging, caution to the wind. You couldn't do that. You couldn't get in there. Sure, you could buy a ticket, spend a bunch of money doing that, buy some beer, think you're a tough guy because now you're buzzed. Get over yourself, all right? If a fight's terrible, I can understand it later in a fight, people really not engaging. I've seen some fights that I'm like, what the heck is this? But in the first round, give them some time here. They're figuring things out. You want to go boo at a basketball game or a baseball game because it's boring and the team stinks and they're making $40 million, plus a year, and they're not hitting or they're not nailing shots or they're not scoring? Sure, that's a little bit more palatable to me. But when you got fighters putting their body, their health, their future on the line for you, and the first 2 minutes they haven't thrown bombs and you're booing, get out of there. No one needs you. You don't know what you're talking about. You couldn't do what they do. You don't have the guts. So suck it up, wait a little bit, have some patience, and see what happens, huh? All right, well, the UFC certainly isn't resting on their laurels with that card we saw last weekend. They are right back in action this weekend out there on Paramount Plus in Sydney, Australia. Tonight, 9 o'clock Eastern Time, UFC 325. Let's talk about some of the top fights on that card. We are headlined by a title fight at featherweight, not an interim fight, an actual title fight. Rematch here between Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopez. Of course, Volkanovski won that vacant title last April when these guys first fought. He hasn't fought since then. Lopez, on the other hand, coming off a win this past September against Gene Silva with that spinning back elbow TKO where he dropped him with the elbow and then finished him off with some good punches that got him right back into this title picture. In some people's minds, it shouldn't have been. This is a chance he shouldn't be getting just yet. There's other guys who are more deserving, but still, he is the one in there. So let's talk about this fight. Volkanovski, the 37-year-old from Australia, 14-3 in his UFC career, 2-3 in his last 5 fights. But those losses are to Islam Makhachev twice and Ilia Topuria. So the best of the best. Last win, of course, as I said, was the unanimous decision win over Lopez to win this vacant title when Topuria moved up. Lopez, a 31-year-old from Brazil, 6-2 in the UFC, coming off that win over Gene Silva. Pretty split between KOs and decisions for his MMA career, but mostly TKOs and decisions in the UFC. So now he is coming in there, trying to get revenge, trying to get that belt. I don't think he's going to do it. I think we get Volk holding on to this title. I know, again, the odds are against me because of the age of Volkanovski. These lighter guys, especially in these title fights, do not do well. Volkanovski has been one of those guys, but he already bucked that trend by beating Lopez for this title already. Volkanovski, minus 148, not even a huge favorite as a champion. Lopez had his moments in that first fight, especially the 4th round. He had Volk shaken. He had him on his bicycle, trying to avoid getting more damage after he took a shot to the eyelid there. But I thought throughout that fight, Volkanovski was in control. He, especially those first 3 rounds, was, doing some big shots that dropped his opponent in Lopez. I thought he was controlling the tempo. I thought he was controlling where the action went. The 5th, he was more striking from the outside and kind of more defensive. Probably still won that round on some cards, but still was not necessarily the aggressor coming forward, dropping his opponent. But those first 3 rounds especially were in the hands of Volkanovski. And if he could do it again at home, I think he gets this win minus 148. Now, how else can you play it? Volk by points is plus 140 if you want to try that. Total rounds set at over 4.5 is minus 116, the favorite there. So they think it's going the distance. I think. Because then they also have to go the distance, no, is minus 118. So it's favored to go over by the odds slightly, but also slightly favored to not go the distance according to the books. I don't think they really know what's going on. It all depends on who's going to win it. Because if it's Volk, I think it goes a distance. If it's Lopez, it probably doesn't. I'm going to play Volk, and I'm going to play to go the distance, yes, at minus 108. That way, if we get to the judges' scorecards, either way, you get the winner. So decent odds there on that one. Also on this card, the lightweight battle as co-main event, number 6 Dan Hooker versus number 8 Benoit Saint Denis. Hooker, the hangman, 35-year-old from New Zealand, coming off that loss to Arman Tsarukyan in November. He is 14-9 in his UFC career, going against Benoit Saint Denis, the Frenchman, 30-year-old, the god of war, who is 8-3 in the UFC, 11 career wins by submission. He's won 3 in a row to finish up 2025, including that last fight at the Garden where he had a 16-second knockout against Beneil Dariush in November. I'm rolling with Saint Denis in this one. He's a big favorite at minus 320 by the book. I am taking him by submission at plus 165. You can get him by submission or points in the double chance at minus 160. I don't think he gets the knockout, even though we just saw that last round. The hangman Hooker is a tough dude. He's got a chin. Taking a lot of shots, so that chin might be breaking soon. But right now, he still can eat a punch and still survive. But where we see the struggles for him is the ground game. We saw that against Tsarukyan where he got taken down and submitted. I think this one is in similar fashion. Maybe not as easy as Tsarukyan did it, but Saint Denis has a great ground game, as we said, a lot of submission victories, and he is really hitting his stride now. He is really focused, training the right way. We've heard him talk about after those losses he had in 2024 that he really had to turn things around and find a better way to focus and train, and he looks like he has done that. I think he gets the submission win at plus 165 over Dan Hooker. Also, at lightweight, you have a battle between number 9, Rafael Fiziev, and number 14, Mauricio Ruffy. One-shot Ruffy, the 29-year-old from Brazil, 3-1 in the UFC. He had first-round KOs in 2 of his first 3 UFC fights, coming off a second-round submission loss to Benoit Saint Denis, though, back in September. Going against Fiziev, the 32-year-old from Azerbaijan, now training out of Florida. 7-4 in the UFC. Lost 3 of his last 4, but 2 of those were to Gaethje. One of those was to Gamrot in the middle there. So some tough top guys in that division, not losing to schlubs. He's coming off a decision win last June in his last fight. So does he make it 2 in a row? I think he does. Fiziev plus 104 is how I'm going on the money line for this one. Ruffy is tough. He gets a lot of knockouts, but he hasn't fought a lot of guys at that upper echelon right now. The toughest name, the biggest name he's fought so far was Saint Denis, and he lost to him. I think Fiziev is on that upper tier. He's fought the best of the best in the division. Hasn't always beat them all, but is still a tough dude, hard to beat. I like him plus 104. And then if you look at the other ways to play it, better odds, I think fight ends by KO TKO at plus 150. Both these guys have a lot of finishes. Both these guys have been knocked out in their losses at times. I like Fiziev at plus 104, but again, hedging bets, saying which way it goes, ends by KO TKO plus 150 because the book doesn't think it's going the distance. No, it's plus 122. The total rounds, the under 2.5 is plus 148, overs minus 190. But I think we probably end in the second to third round, probably under that 2.5, but I'm going to play it as the KO TKO because you're not getting a submission from either of these guys. Also, on this card, at heavyweight, you have a battle between number 12, Tuivasa, and number 15, Thaleson Teixeira. Teixeira, the 26-year-old from Brazil, is 1-1 in the UFC, 8-1 for his MMA career. 7 of those 8 career wins are by KO TKO, coming off a 35-second TKO loss to Derek Lewis last July. Bam Tuivasa, the 32-year-old from Australia, going to be from the home crowd, 14-8 in MMA, 8-8 in the UFC, 500 record. He's lost his last 5 fights in the UFC. Hasn't fought for 18 months. So guess where I'm going? Yeah, Teixeira, minus 340 on the money line. Not the greatest odds, not the best line. So I'm going to play it Teixeira by KO TKO at minus 170. Still have to lay a bunch on this one, which isn't the way you want to do it, but that is the best odds you're getting for Teixeira in this fight. You can try to play different, like the total rounds. Under 1.5 is minus 260. They think it's going to end quickly. You could try to play the over plus 200 if you wanted to. I'm tempted to try to play it that way, see if it goes a little later, but I'm not going to. I'm going to stay with the KO TKO by Teixeira at minus 170. Maybe throw it in a parlay to make it a little bit more palatable. A lightweight, you have a battle between Salkilld and Jamie Mullarkey. Not the greatest fight. Not the greatest battle between two guys you really have to worry about. Neither of them are ranked. Mullarkey, the 31-year-old from Australia, is 6-6 in the UFC and lost 3 of his last 5. Salkilld, the 26-year-old from Australia, 10-1 in MMA, 3-0 in the UFC, so he's on a nice streak here, a nice start to his career. 2 of those 3 UFC wins by KO TKO. So could make a name for himself. Hasn't gotten to those rankings yet, but I think he gets the win. The book is a heavy favorite for him. Salkilld is minus 1050. So not playing it on money line for sure. Him by KO TKO, though, was only minus 130. So a lot of KO wins against a mediocre guy. I'm going to play it that way. Minus 130. Mullarkey's been dropped for a loss 6 times, including his last 4 losses. So if Salkild's going to win this, I think he does it by KO TKO. All right, we got a great fight in boxing happening tonight as well. At the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, you have a battle between Teofimo Lopez and Shakur Stevenson, ring 6 card on DAZN. That should be a great matchup between these two guys. They're fighting for Lopez's WBO junior welterweight title. I love that these guys are fighting. I love this fight is happening. There's so many great storylines on it. I mean, these guys sparred back in the day. These guys are both in their prime right now, same age at 28, very close actually, their birthdays are. But too often you have guys like this that you want to see fight that are, somewhat, friendly-ish, not fight each other, avoid each other. The promoter doesn't have them fight, especially if they're on the same promoter, which these two guys used to be, because you don't want to ruin the record of them. You don't want to ruin the shine off both these guys. You have them fight somebody else and keep their titles and not put them up against the best fight that we want to see. But we're getting it from these guys. They're stepping up to the challenge. So you are getting a great battle between Lopez, a 28-year-old from Brooklyn, former unified lightweight champion and current junior welterweight champion, 22-1 in his career, 13 wins by KO TKO. Only lost a split decision loss to George Kambosos. Got wins over guys like Lomachenko and Barboza Jr. Going against Shakur Stevenson, the 28-year-old from Newark, New Jersey, former Olympian, former champion in the featherweight, super featherweight, and now champion in the WBC lightweight division. He is 24-0, unbeaten for his career, 11 wins by KO TKO, wins over Jamel Herring and William Zepeda. He's moving up for the first time to this division. Lopez is the one who holds the title now. Shakur Stevenson is moving up in weight to battle him and try to take his belt. So moving up for the first time can be a trouble, can be a hassle for some of these guys. I don't think it is for him. The way he fights, he's not coming in there trying to bully his opponent in Lopez. He's not coming in there trying to get the finish. He's a guy that goes for the points. He's a guy that, fights counter fighter, movement, defensive fighter. I think that could serve him well in this division. I think he'll be fine then. Lopez, especially not being a big, strong power puncher. I think that this is a good fight for Shakur Stevenson. I think he gets the victory. Minus 290 on the money line is the way you have to play that if you want him there. You can get him by points, but that's minus 210, so you're not dropping too much of the juice off there. A little bit of better odds. The fight is minus 600 to go the distance. The over-under is set at 11.5 and minus 650 for the over. So the book obviously thinks this is going the distance. You can't make money that way. You can play him by points at minus 210, especially if you parlay it with something. Maybe parlay it with the UFC fights. You can get some better odds there. But if you want to play this fight straight up, you either got to lay some juice at minus 290 for Stevenson, or do it by points at minus 210, or take a chance, go contrarian, and play some of the other juicy plus money, bets that are going to be there to try to make some money. But I think Stevenson wins this fight. Not the best way to bet it, not the juiciest odds, but I think he comes through with this victory and outpoints his opponent. Might not be the prettiest, might not be the most flashy, he probably isn't going to get a knockout, but I think he gets the victory. All right, before we get out of here on this episode of Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano, I want to touch on one more thing, a piece of news we have, and that was the PFL finally coming out with rankings for their fighters. This is great because now we at least know the top 10 guys or girls in each division, because for a long time, we weren't even sure who was on these rosters as they were combining Bellator and the PFL. So now we have a clear line of who are the top fighters in each division for the PFL, and there's some things people were a little up in arms about. We'll talk about that. Here's some of my thoughts on this. The first ever rankings for the PFL and their organization in their many divisions. Now, of course, the one everyone's freaking out about is the heavyweight rankings, because there's a name left off those, and that is Francis Ngannou. People are up in arms about it. What's going on? Is he no longer with the organization? And I like John Martin's explanation for it, the new CEO of the PFL. It makes sense. The guy hasn't fought. He fought once for them. Now he's under contract. He can fight one more time before he gets out of there. Whether he stays or leaves, either way, he's got one more fight on his deal, and they want to make that happen. But you can't put a guy in the rankings who's only fought once and hasn't fought in a year and a half. It just doesn't make sense. So even though he probably is the best, or at least second best fighter in their organization as a heavyweight, you're not going to put him in those rankings. And he also is a big enough name and has enough of a resume that you can still put him against Nemkov for a title fight, even though he's not in those rankings. So don't read into it. Don't get crazy about it. Doesn't matter if Francis Ngannou was in the rankings. He's the best or second best heavyweight they have, and he's going to be fighting in a huge fight before he gets out of there. Other thoughts I have on different rankings, different divisions. I like what they did with the middleweight division, where Johnny Eblen gets the respect he deserves, because this guy was unbeaten for a long time, champion, got caught by Costello Venstinas, but instead of just throwing him to the side because you have this fight with Venstinas and Edwards, instead of making Edwards the number one so that he is fighting the champion as champion versus number one, you still have Johnny Eblen as the number one contender in that division. So they still give him the respect he deserves as the former champion, former undefeated fighter. Now, you can still have Edwards fight him, and it's not too bad, even though he's number two, because he won that tournament last year. So, if you're going to have a champion of the tournament, you got to give him a shot at the title. So I like that they still gave Eblen the love, even though Edwards is getting the title shot. I was also a little bit surprised in those rankings that Imba Kasanganay is number 3. I'm surprised a guy like Dalton Rosta isn't higher up. I mean, he made the finals last year. I thought instead of 5, maybe you could have put him at 3 after Eblen and Edwards. But right now it is Imba Kasanganay. Also, a lightweight, very surprising that Archie Colgan is the number 1 in that division, number 1 contender after, of course, the champion Nurmagomedov. Then it's Archie Colgan, not Alfie Davis, who is fighting for this title next week. Alfie Davis is sitting there at number 2. Despite him winning that tournament last year, he is not the top-rated contender for them right now in these rankings. Maybe that's because they figure he's going to lose to Nurmagomedov, and instead of having to drop him down, they just leave him where he is afterwards. And Colgan is unbeaten, so you got to give him the respect there. Just a little bit weird to have the guy win the tournament and to be fighting for the championship and not have him as a top contender. But, I mean, they did it with Edwards too, so I guess it's something that they've done consistently right now with these rankings so far. Also, the pound for pound rankings were a little interesting. Not that I have a problem with most of them, because I thought they did a pretty good job with it. But when you get to number 10, the last one on the pound for pound rankings, it's Paul Hughes. I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve it. I'm not saying he's not one of their best fighters in the organization. But in the lightweight rankings, they had him at number 4. So he's number 4 in his division, but he's number 10 pound for pound, where he then skips over number 3 and number 2 and number 1 as the only second lightweight on the pound for pound rankings. Because you have the champ Nurmagomedov sitting there as the top pound for pound, and then the last pound for pound is Paul Hughes. So the guys who are ranked 1, 2, and 3 in that division aren't on the pound for pound rankings, but somehow the guy who's number 4 is. I'm not saying it's wrong. He probably is one of the 10 best fighters in that organization, but if you're going to do that, then you got to bump him up in those lightweight rankings, even though he lost Nurmagomedov twice. Overall, though, I like the rankings. I think it's great for them. It gives a clear picture of who's on the roster, of where things stand, of who could be in title contention if they get some wins here. Now, some of those, of course, don't have a champion. We got to rectify that with some of these fights we have coming up over the next 6 months or so for the PFL. But overall, some good changes, getting rid of the tournaments, making rankings, giving us some clear, picture of where people stand in this organization. I like what John Martin is doing. I like the interviews I've heard of him with the PFL. I think he's taking it in a good direction so far. And I think 2026 could be a big year for the PFL if they do things right. We'll see how things work out. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. Thank you so much for joining me. It was great to talk about the UFC card from last week. Great to preview this one and that boxing card as well. When we come back next week on the show, I'll recap UFC 325 in Australia. I'll recap the Ring 6 card in New York City with Stevenson and Lopez. We'll preview BKFC Knucklemania 6 coming up there in Philadelphia. You got a heavyweight title on the line and a newly changed fight, as the Juggernaut Hunt is going to be fighting the Redneck Mundell now. Yoel Romero out of that fight, so that makes it even more interesting in my book. You also have PFL Dubai that we're going to preview. Nurmagomedov going against Alfie Davis headlining that one. You're going to have a UFC fight night between Bautista and Oliveira. First one at the new Meta Apex. Yep, we're still stuck at the Apex because not only are they scheduling cards there, but they're doing naming rights deals. So that's going nowhere soon. We'll also touch on some other boxing news. There's some other fights going on next week. See what else is going on in combat sports as far as news and notes. All that coming up next week on Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. Make sure you follow us on our social medias. On X, it is at Fighting Lines. On Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok at Fighting Lines Pod. You can follow me at On Air Mafia on Instagram, on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it. And if you're taking part in the show, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, like, subscribe, share, comment, get involved. Thanks so much for taking part in it. Looking forward to talking to you next week here on Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano.